We are going
Good
to
afternoon. On behalf of the Mostra, welcome for this press conference. We are, of course, pleased to welcome the directors and the guests for the program we just screened now. So, from my left, Matthias Müller and Christoph Girardet for Meteor, and on the right for Shockhead Soul, the director, Simon Pummell, the protagonist of the film, and the producer, if I'm not wrong. And also on the far left, we are joined by Mark Lewis, director of Black Mirror at the National Gallery, which was supposed to be discussed yesterday, but we rescheduled the press conference, so he's joining us today. As usual, if Marie-Pierre agrees, we would start with a couple of questions for the first part of the program, that means for the short films, and then we can go ahead with a discussion about the feature. You're, of course, welcome to ask your questions, so that's the... I think we should all do it in English. Otherwise, I will. I hope that you have seen not just the films we just show now, but also yesterday and the day before, possibly Black Mirror at the National Gallery. So the first question would be for Mark. I've read often that you try to avoid any narrative in your work, but this one strikes me as having even some characters. They seem to be there. These machines filming each other and filming what's around them. They seem to be looking for something. I wanted to ask you if this was a step different. You were looking for something different into this with this film than with other previous works. If you just push the button so the light goes. Not the big one.
This one?
Okay.
This one? Okay. Do I have to hold it? No. I don't think it's true that I try to avoid narrative. I just try to do things which are simple and without complexity in terms of narrative. I think it's probably all I can do. But there is a narrative in most film. There is a narrative in all films because it's all time passing, so something's happening. And in this film, there is a very simple narrative, and it's what happens when a black mirror and its monster mother or father goes for a visit into a gallery of art and looks for something which it can identify with, and in the end it finds its doppelganger in terms of shape, formal connections. So I don't mean to say no to your question, but I think every narrative is, all films have narrative, but let's say the layering and the complexity of the narrative is stripped down in my films, and I think this film in that is similar to other films, really.
Could you just say something about why these rooms and why in particular the painting that the mirror and the camera are moving towards?
This painting by Averkamp called A Winter Scene by a Castle is one of my favorite paintings at the National Gallery. I love it for many, many reasons, but it's a kind of a genre scene. It's a scene of a carnival when the river freezes over. I've always been drawn to that painting at the National Gallery. And I had in mind for the last 3 or 4 years that I'd like to make a film there, but I had no idea what to do. I just didn't have any ideas. And then one day, the guy, Martin Zakili, a French designer who makes that mirror, asked me if I would make a film with one of his things that he makes. And so I had no idea. I went to his studio and I saw the black mirror hanging on his studio wall. And then I just immediately knew in a second that I wanted to make a film about that black mirror finding that painting, because they're both, I mean, stupid, simple idea, they're both circles. They're both, you know, they share the same form. So that was the idea.
Of course, you're welcome to join the discussion. Otherwise, I would move to ask a couple of questions to Matthias and Christoph about Meteor. And the first would be, this film of yours has some two different sources of materials, the black and white and the color footage. I was wondering that in this case, because I know you always claim that your previous film and your previous work together are the result of your joint contribution on whatever aspect of the film, writing, thinking, editing, and so on. I was wondering if this film that is made of clearly two different materials which you work with is also the joining of your different interests you had in the color material. This is more like a piece of yours in which we can see what each of you was somehow looking for.
It's sure two films in one. What more can you ask for? But we didn't really differentiate between the black and white stock and the color stock. This was of minor importance to us, I must say. Our main intention was to not manipulate the found footage that we worked with, or to manipulate it as little as necessary, actually, and to keep the whole film and the whole narrative as plain and simple and accessible as possible, and to also leave all the tricks of experimental filmmaking, all the formal and technical tricks out.
And you want
No.
Maybe next
Yeah,
one,
maybe,
please.
okay. Maybe one. I wouldn't treat the material as two different sources. I mean, the science fiction footage and the planets and everything is very infantile model type stuff, so that fits totally to the boyish appearance of the rest.
And I was also interested in the two different materials. I think you also had to have a different approach to them. I mean, most of the black and white films, as we see from the list of titles at the end, most of them are from films that probably were part of your memory as viewers, and so they were somewhere in your memories, in your desire to do something about them, while the other footage, if I'm not wrong, comes from Russian science fiction films, and that, I guess, was more part of a research or a different...
Right. Yeah.
So could you just say something about how
the whole project, first of all, I should say that in general, our projects, except for one, Mirror, our projects aren't based on any script or so. There's no master plan, and there's a very unpredictable dynamic in our working together. And mostly the found footage, the appropriated footage itself kind of suggests or proposes how it wants to be recycled by us. Sure, we decontextualize it from different sources, but so we start building up a kind of crude and quite big, actually, collection of clips, and out of this collection we try to create a more coherent, a more precise, coherent collection, and that is mostly the source material for our projects.
And how you run into the Russian material? It was...
Yeah, that was a result of research, as you said before.
Yeah, sometimes you have, of course, film material which follows you since your childhood, or is part of your collective or individual memory, and sometimes it's nice to discover something which you haven't seen. So, and that was part of the whole science fiction thing was a totally re-research of the whole genre starting from the 50s, from the color times until I think 2001. I think that's by Kubrick. That's the Space Odyssey. That's the final point. So it would use material in between time.
We definitely did not want to produce a period piece. That was not our intention. Our intention was to create a personal work out of appropriated images. And sure, Christoph and I have lived through very different childhoods. I mean, Christoph was raised in Tokyo when he was a little boy. I grew up in a small Westphalian town in Germany. But we talked a lot about our childhood memories, and during this process of intense communication, we realized that our memories of childhood had lots of things in common. This feeling of being lost in a way within a family, this feeling of not truly being connected, the feeling of possibly being marooned, only adopted by our actually physical parents, etc. And that was the basis that this project grew on.
One last question before handing it to Marie-Pierre. Could you tell us something about the text? I mean, it's not the first time that another filmmaker is involved in the text of your film. You worked with Mike Holborn before for another film. In this case, the voice is by John Smith. I was wondering if he was also involved, as Mike Holborn was before, in the writing of the text and where the text comes from. And
John Smith wasn't involved at all. We were really happy to have him speak the text because we were looking for some mature and mellow voice. And he loved to do it, but he did not even want to see the film before. He did not have any information when we made the sound recordings. The texts are lifted off fairy tales, most of them collected by the Brothers Grimm, so very popular fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel. And one other is a more literary fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, the Snow Queen, I think is the English title of it. And we atomized these texts or parts of these texts and collaged these excerpts into a new kind of crude, surreal narrative.
if there are not questions about the first two films we just talked about, there is one? No, okay. So please, Marie-Pierre.
I was just thinking, listening to everybody just before beginning the conversation with Simon and with you all, that something was happening in this edition of the Mostra regarding subconscious and psychoanalysis and a lot of things like that, because in the selection of Orizzonti we have an adaptation of Le Petit Pousset by Charles Perrault that would be a French Grimm. In the competition filmed by Cronenberg, right, about Jung and Freud, and how come the same year comes Simon with his Schreber case film, and Mark Lewis Films is trying maybe to make some, to give some conscience to machines we are not supposed to have any. So no, I would just thinking that films go together always and try to speak to each other in very strange ways sometimes when artists go to the fundamentals of what they have to do. So getting more specifically into Simon's film, my first question would be just to know, Simon, how you prepare the balance for this project between being, let's say, documentarist, that is giving information and knowledge, I would say knowledge, right, about the famous or less famous, I don't know, famous for some Schreber case, how then you organize the more so-called traditional fiction around it, no? Actors, sets, situations and dialogues, and then how your personal, let's say, fantasy, and how you make this object become a maverick, in a way, a maverick object, no? How do you find a balance between the elements? Is this at the level of the script, of the research, or during shooting and fabrication? That would be my first question before everybody...
The big one. Okay. I think that this idea of multiple strands in the film is in the end about the notion of truth in a documentary, and one of our funding sources is a documentary, the Netherlands Film Fund documentary board, and so the notion of to what extent the film is a documentary was discussed very early, and it became quite quickly clear that it is a documentary about something that never existed, which is Schreber's delusional vision of the cosmos. And so once you throw in the notion of truth, or verifiable truth, which I think is at the heart of Schreber's story, into such question, it makes sense to build a film out of different strands that in a way I hope contaminate each other. And I think the interaction between the documentary material and the drama and the CGI animation was something that we as a group of people, as a team who made the film, worked on constantly during the production. So that some of the conversations that I had with Hugo were very much about the factual basis of Schreber's life. We had a very full cooperation with the Science Museum in the Netherlands, where the film was shot on their premises. So nearly all the props are actually quite rare scientific artifacts. So when Hugo walked into a space, that was made out of historical facts, if you like. In the same way, the contemporary psychoanalysts and psychiatrists, by dressing them in 19th century costume and not allowing it to be clear that they were the voice of now, was trying to avoid a delusion, which for me was very important to avoid, that somehow we are smarter because we live now, that we automatically, that a contemporary expert will always know more than someone from the 19th century. And I wanted the audience to have to thread together the different elements of fiction and fact in the project.
Flooded it with
I just wanted to, since the case of President Schreber is so famous, I mean, it's one of the most famous Freud cases, and a lot of things are written and were written about it. So what attracted you, you decided for Schreber case, for your movie? I mean, I thought it was about the difficult divide between madness and truth, reality. It was maybe about education, as a case of the movie by Cronenberg, in a way, is the hysteria and the paranoia coming from education, the illusions that many doctors had about how educated people, or the right of everybody to be free. I mean, it's full of things, and I wanted to know why you chose this famous case and to put it in a very different way, a different narrative, your point of view.
I think first, the way I encountered Schreber was through the Freud essay, like most people, I think. But actually, I found the power of the quoted passages within Freud's essay to be more powerful than the interpretive text by Freud. And that seemed really interesting to me, that Schreber's own voice is in fact the most powerful element in that famous essay. So that sent me back to the writing. It sent me back to the poetry of Schreber's own book. And I think it contains many elements that are very important as contemporary issues in terms of how we relate to machines. Do we believe that we're in dialogue with machines? Do we believe they dominate us? Are they still something we use, or do they use us? And then the many layers of secrets that have been uncovered about Schreber's case that are not in Schreber's own text, the history of his family, the history of his childhood, the fact that he comes from a dysfunctional family that actually dramatized that by building machines seemed to me to be something very extraordinary. So I think there's many layers of poetry in both Schreber's own writing and in the facts and around his text. And yet I struggled to think about how could one make that into a long-form film, because there's something very dark and kind of nihilistic at the center of Schreber's text. And for me, it was very useful to realize that Schreber is famous because he was a writer, not because he was a 19th century madman. The 19th century, you can go and look at the Prinzhorn collection with fragments of outsider art still preserved. And you realize you're talking about a great disappeared community of people. These are hundreds of thousands of people that never had any voice and just disappeared into asylums. What makes Schreiber famous is that he used his previous training as a lawyer. It's not insignificant that he was a top-flight lawyer. He was not just a lawyer, he was one of the great lawyers of his generation. And so the power of his mind allowed him to marshal these incredible psychotic experiences and turn them into a text.
We'll share the microphone for 1 second. In fact, probably this is what led you to choose this process, this trial form for considering mise en scène. It's because you thought probably that it was consistent with the personality and the text itself.
The trial form was both, I think, consistent with Schreiber's own story, and it was also a potentially dramatizable form of dialogue that could allow you to present a series of questions, which I think is what the film is. And it also provided a context in which the contemporary voices could sit in a very equivocal, potentially mysterious relationship to the drama, that they were not explaining the drama, they were actually sucked into the drama.
Faccio la domanda in italiano perché parlo arabo. Piccola premessa, la domanda è Simon Pummell. Piccola premessa, i film che ho visto dei registi presenti, almeno per me, sono i più belli che abbia visto finora a Venezia. Quindi, wow. Detto questo, a Simon Pummell, tra gli esperti presenti nel film, che sono tutti psicoanalisti, non traduce?
Can you hear me?
Allora, ripeto rapidamente. I migliori film che abbia visto finora sono i film dei signori presenti al palco, quindi grazie. Per Simon Pummell, tra gli esperti presenti nel film in costume c'è un unico storico del cinema e dei media, il professor Ian Christie. Perché c'è Ian Christie? C'è un filo che lega il cinema, le macchine della visione di fine Ottocento, la stereoscopia, la radiografia, alla macchina della follia di Schreiber e quindi al digitale di oggi? Grazie.
The question, maybe I should paraphrase just the end of the question, is what is the organic link between cinema and madness, and what might that link be, and to what extent does the English cinema expert Ian Christie represent that link in the film? And I think there is, first I should say that Shockhead Soul has a website on which the very extensive interviews with all of the 6 figures that you see in the courtroom, psychoanalysts, Ian Christie as a film historian, the psychiatrists and neurologists, they're in full on the website, so you can actually listen to any particular strand of argument from one of the experts. And the reason I tell you that is because there is a long strand where Ian Christie unpicks what he thinks is a very complex relationship between madness and film, both from the use of cinema to document mental patients, which is one of the very early uses of documentary film. And there's a wonderful collection in the Ghislaine Museum in Belgium of just single frame. It's the most simple, primitive cinema you can imagine, with a locked camera in front of a backdrop just thrown up. And they just literally carry on psychiatric patients and allow them to manifest their hysteria, and then they carry them off again. I mean, it's extremely shocking. They strike you in the present tense, as if these people just jump across history. And what Ian elaborates is from this very crude early documenting of madness. Through films such as Caligari, there starts to be a very complex relationship between madness and film that really developed in German expressionist cinema. So to follow that strand, I would urge you to listen to Ian's comments on the website. A kind of a deeper structure in the film is that it became clear in our research that the language of psychotic delusions tends to nearly always draw from cutting-edge technology. And that once we did the research to understand that Schreber's machines were a mixture, in a way, of the typewriter, the telegraph, X-ray machines, you know, a cluster of late 19th century communication forms, it became much simpler to devise the writing down cosmos. The writing down ball is actually modelled on a famous typewriter called the Malling-Hansen typewriter, which is half a dome. And it was one of those great failed innovations that was a beautiful design that never was commercially successful. It's very famous because Nietzsche owned an early Malling-Hansen, and he wrote poems about technology contaminating our minds on his Malling-Hansen typewriter. So that's one of the elements in the writing down cosmos, along with radiology, along with the telegraph. There's an associated art piece that we're developing to go with Shockhead Soul, which is a video installation called The Sputnik Effect, which contexts the writing down balls of the cosmos in a different way. And the reason it's called the Sputnik effect is that that's identified by psychiatrists as the death of God in psychotic visions. That's the moment when Sputnik went up in the early 50s, that people stopped checking into psychiatric casualty and saying that God was controlling them through machines. They started just saying the machines were controlling them. And that's that's actually an anaglyph 3D installation, so it also references kind of 50s horror movies. So that's almost the fictional machine of the film will actually have other lives in other parts of the project.
I had a rather simple question, because you came here with your main actor, yeah, Hugo. How do you involve Hugo in the whole process of the film? Because it's a complex project, multimedia, multi-platformed. But Hugo is an actor; he has a part to play. And so, how do these things connect? And how does Hugo himself connect with the project as a whole? You know, being in charge of a part in a play.
Well, I think it's certainly a role where Hugo was surrounded by facts, because there was a huge amount of historical facts, and he was also surrounded by obviously absent fiction, because the writing down balls were not there at that point. So maybe it's more relevant to ask him how he experienced that.
For me, it was a complete intuition. I really had some reading about Schreber, and I saw a performance about Schreber, but it was Simon who convicted me by the way he talked about his project, that we were on the same level, that we were busy with the same volonté to express something. And I never had a director, I'm always playing in the theater, that reconforts me completely as he did. I had never the idea I disappoint him, or he is a bit other meaning. I had the idea that I did exactly what he wanted me to do. You should...
He actually did exactly what he wanted to do. That just turned out to be right, I think is a more accurate way to put it.
Yeah. He gave me the confidence to do what I wanted, and I was in circumstances that I wanted to play that, what I must play in the film, in the scenario, because it was exactly what I felt at that moment about being a bit desperate about life. And I know from childhood severe elevation, severe verwarring, confusion, and illness, mental illness. It was always a terrain that I looked with confidence. I was very vertrouwd with it. It was familiar to me, and I felt very nice, and I had colleagues who were very nice. The lady I played with was very nice. I could understand her. I had never such a nice experience on film. Thanks to him, thanks to the colleagues, and everything was there. Which will not will say it was a nice performance for me, but I had a feeling.
I think maybe also it's worth just saying one agreement that we made very early on together was we made the agreement that that Schreiber always made the sanest possible choices in difficult circumstances, so that the experience of being mad is not an experience of being mad. One does not in any way behave in a mad way. One has deeply disturbing information coming into your world, coming into your mind, coming into your senses. And you try, we felt Schreiber tried to make at any moment the most dignified, the sanest, and the most intelligent choices he could. It's that his information sometimes was a little outside the norm. I think that then was something to get hold of, because he could make choices then. Schreiber, we agreed that Schreiber always was making choices, and that was...
You shouldn't play a madman. Exactly. You should play a man who is serious about the voices he hears, the things he thinks, and he is an intelligent man, he's a capable man, he is good in his job, he can very good judge problems of other people. He is not a freak, but he is a serious man, and he hears voices and they tell him he should change into a woman to save the world. And that's serious for him. It's not, you think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's an idea that has a certain resonance.
Right.
Yes. And Freud and other writers are looking for problems with his father and his elevation, who was severe and Spartanic. But I think at the moment he had really the need to save the world.
We're in three on it now. 3%. I just wanted, yeah. There is one question here, and then I'll give the word back to Sergio, because I think that we should ask a global question to all our friends here about. Well, thank you for the compliment to the friend here who said about the beauty of the films, and of course we can not agree more, but I would like to ask myself, after our friend has asked us a question, if our friends, directors here, do not fear that they would make us viewers paranoid. Okay, so, but please.
Well, maybe you finish that question first.
As you wish, You go ahead. I feel very paranoid at a certain point, seeing all the films of all the directors present here. I don't know at what point they themselves feel that they have to deal with their personal paranoia, or if they have any, or because something is playing around in all films, I think, that are present here, but in another films of the program as well, around the possibility of being free today with all the new or less new machines that are around, the new systems, and the terrible amount of images, and also the terrible power of images. So I think that this conscience has become here has reached a form of climax, and I myself feel very frightened by what I see, deliciously frightened. Okay, so maybe, I don't know if you can comment on that. All of you. Don't put the first. And then we'll go to... Okay. Access, she's
Paranoid.
not.
It's interesting. I've never thought of paranoia regarding our work. I think in our case it's a very positive film.
Yeah.
So it's because it speaks about the possibilities of culture and the difficulties of culture, like cultural techniques of filmmaking, writing, language, music, and that can lead to somewhere, but it's up to you to do it. So I don't see any paranoia in that. So, I mean, there maybe in earlier works we had some more paranoid-driven pieces, yeah, but it's been a while, so. No, not really, but okay. Not this one particularly.
Yeah. Actually, maybe it's not just our films, it's the haircuts. I think we all actually have the identical haircuts, which is probably producing the paranoia. I think, actually, I would claim that Shockhead is also, in a way, a very positive film about some possibility of human communication. But of course, it also has a kind of a paranoid vision of machines. And for me, what's fascinating is how fascinated we, who would not see ourselves as psychotic, at least all the time, how deeply our culture is fascinated by these artists we deem to be outsider artists. You know, we feel the need to call a certain kind of artist an outsider artist because that keeps them in a convenient box. But the truth is their visions chime with us. And some of that's to do with, I think, the way that they tap into very, very deep structures in our psyches and in our languages. And I think there's a moment where one of the experts in the film said that Schreber is remembered and is a literary figure because he describes the mythic qualities of his experience. And mythic qualities are things we share by definition. Our myths are the stories that bind us together. And I think these kinds of stories of the interbreeding of human and machine are probably the beginning of our new mythologies. And mythologies always tell us stories about things that we're concerned about in various ways.
I have a question for the producer, because I can imagine that this is a really difficult project to get financed. Can you tell us a little bit about that history?
Well, I think this film is not hard to finance. I think the power of this film is in the director, that he is so well equipped in. He's a sort of a pixel doubler, I think. He doubles the film with almost no budget. He creates an entire world on the screen, and also mixing all these different forms, like making 3 films at the same time. Like, it's a dream to produce with a director like this. Not a problem.
Just write a check. Positive answer.
Okay, I guess if there are no further questions from the audience, I thank you for your attention, and most of all, I thank our guests, maybe.
Guests are here for some time more? Or
I'm afraid Mark is leaving tomorrow morning,
yes.
But I think Matthias and Christoph will be here for a few more days, if any of you is interested in...
and Simon, are you still here?
Okay.
And Simon is here until Monday evening, so everybody, of course, is welcome to have personal contact.
Thank you very
all.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.